At some point in human history, someone looked down at the body of a person they knew and made a strange decision. Instead of leaving the body where it had fallen, they carried it somewhere safe. They placed it inside the earth, arranged it carefully, and covered it so that it would disappear from the living world. We do not know who this person was. We don't know what words were spoken or whether anyone cried. But this decision may represent one of the most important changes in the human mind. It was the moment when death became more than the end of a body. It became something the living felt responsible for. Today, burying the dead feels normal. Nearly every human society has developed some way of caring for a person after death. Some bodies are placed underground, some are burned. Some are preserved, wrapped, displayed, or returned to nature. The details change, but the basic idea remains the same. Humans rarely treat the body of someone they love as an ordinary object. But why? Why did ancient humans begin placing their dead inside graves when nature could have removed the bodies for them? Why spend valuable energy digging into hard ground, moving heavy stones, collecting objects, or returning to the same burial place years later? The simplest explanation is practical. A decomposing body attracts insects and scavengers. It produces a powerful smell and may bring dangerous animals close to a camp. Covering the body protects the living from these problems. But simple disposal does not explain everything archaeologists have discovered.
Some ancient bodies were not thrown carelessly into holes. They were positioned deliberately. Arms were folded, knees were drawn toward the chest, bodies were placed on their sides or backs. In some graves, objects were left nearby. In others, the soil contained red ochre, a natural pigment that ancient humans also used to mark surfaces, tools, and perhaps their own bodies.
These details suggest that something more complicated was happening. Some of the earliest, widely accepted intentional human burials were created roughly 100,000 years ago in the region now known as Israel. Inside caves such as Qafzeh and Skhul, archaeologists discovered the remains of early Homo sapiens. At Qafzeh, several individuals were found alongside pieces of red ochre and ochre-stained objects. The people responsible were not living in cities. They had no written language, hospitals, cemeteries, or religious buildings. Their survival depended on finding food, avoiding predators, reading the weather, and protecting one another. Every day required physical effort. And yet, when someone died, they stopped. They spent time and energy doing something for a person who could no longer repay them. That may be the first mystery of burial. From a purely immediate survival perspective, the dead cannot hunt, they cannot gather food, protect children, or warn the group about danger. But the living continue to treat them as though some part of their importance remained. This does not automatically prove that ancient humans believed in an afterlife. Archaeology can show us where a body was placed and what was left beside it, but it cannot show us the exact thoughts inside the minds of the people standing around the grave. A stone beside a body could have been a tool for another world. It could have been a personal possession, it could have been a symbol of status, or it could simply have been something that reminded the group of the person they had lost. But whatever the reason, the object was no longer being treated only as a useful tool. It had become connected to a memory. And memory may be the real beginning of burial. Most animals react to death in some way. Elephants have been observed touching and investigating bones. Some primates remain close to dead companions. Whales and dolphins may carry deceased young through the water. These behaviors suggest that grief, confusion, or attachment did not suddenly appear with modern humans. But humans did something unusual with those emotions. We turned them into rituals. A ritual gives shape to a feeling that is otherwise difficult to control. When someone dies, the human mind faces a contradiction. The person is physically present, but they no longer move. Their face is recognizable, but the personality behind it appears to be gone. The brain still expects them to speak. It still remembers their habits. It may imagine hearing their footsteps or seeing them enter the shelter. The relationship continues inside the minds of the living, even though the person can no longer participate in it. Burial may have helped ancient humans solve this contradiction. Placing the body inside the earth created a visible ending. The person was no longer simply lying nearby, they had been moved from the world of everyday life into a separate place. The grave became a boundary between the living and the dead. But it also became a location where memory could survive. Before permanent homes, written names, photographs, and family records, a burial site could preserve a person's place in the group. People could return to it. Children could be shown where an older relative rested. Stories could become attached to the landscape. A cave was no longer only a cave. A hill was no longer only a hill. It became the place where someone important had been buried. Over time, graves may have helped transform empty landscapes into human territory. A group could point to the ground and say, in whatever language they possessed, "Our people are here. We have lived here before. The ones who came before us remain beneath this land." The dead may have become the first permanent members of communities that were constantly moving. Burial also reveals something about how ancient humans understood identity. A body was not treated as interchangeable with every other body. It belonged to a particular person with a particular history. This becomes especially powerful when archaeologists discover carefully buried children. A small child could not have been a great hunter, an experienced leader, or a powerful provider. The child's value did not come from years of useful work. Yet some ancient communities still took the time to place children carefully into graves. That suggests the individual mattered because of who they were, not only because of what they could produce. Neanderthals also appear to have buried at least some of their dead deliberately. At La Ferrassie in France, evidence indicates that the body of a young Neanderthal child was placed inside a deliberately prepared pit more than 40,000 years ago. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, multiple Neanderthal remains were discovered. For years, researchers debated whether some had been intentionally buried and whether flowers had been placed around one of the bodies. The flower interpretation remains controversial, but the site still provides evidence that Neanderthals lived in socially connected groups and sometimes cared for injured individuals for many years. This matters because burial was once imagined as something only modern humans were intelligent or emotional enough to understand. But the archaeological record suggests that the boundary between us and other human species was not so simple. Neanderthals were not silent monsters wandering through the cold. They made tools, controlled fire, hunted cooperatively, cared for injured companions, and may have placed some of their dead into graves. Perhaps the question is not when humans suddenly became emotional. Perhaps the question is when emotions became organized into culture. Grief by itself disappears when the grieving person dies, but a burial custom can be taught. One generation watches another. Children see what adults do with the dead. They learn where bodies should be placed, which objects should accompany them, and what actions should be performed. The ritual survives longer than any individual person. This may be why burial traditions became increasingly complex. As human groups grew, graves began to communicate more information. They could show family relationships, social position, personal achievements, beliefs, or membership within a community. Some people were buried with beads, tools, weapons, food, animals, ornaments, or rare materials transported across great distances. The grave became a final story told about the person inside it. But the story was created by the living. A powerful burial may tell us as much about the people who survived as it does about the person who died. It shows what they valued, what they feared, what they remembered, and what they wanted future generations to believe. In this way, the dead became part of human communication. Thousands of years later, we are still repeating versions of the same behavior. We gather around bodies, we clean and dress them, we lower them into the ground or place them into fire. We bring flowers, photographs, jewelry, letters, and meaningful objects. We speak to people who can no longer answer. We mark their names on stone because we know that our own memories will eventually disappear. Modern funerals may look completely different from the burials inside ancient caves, but they are driven by the same impossible problem. How do you accept that a person is gone when they remain alive inside your mind? Perhaps humans did not invent burial because we understood death. Perhaps we invented it because we could not fully understand death. An animal can disappear. A fire can go out. A season can end. But a person is more than something the eyes can see. A person exists inside habits, stories, expectations, and relationships. When the body stops moving, all of those invisible parts do not immediately vanish. So humans created a place to put the body while the mind slowly learned how to live with the memory. The first grave may not have been evidence that ancient humans believed death was the beginning of another life. It may have been evidence that love, attachment, and identity had become powerful enough to continue after someone was gone. Long before humans built temples, wrote religious texts, or carved names into stone, someone lowered another person into the earth and covered them carefully. The body disappeared, but the relationship did not. And that may be why humans began burying the dead.